Welcome to the floating world. A place of dreams, desire, and unimaginable luxury. Here, the night is brighter than the day. Here, money flows like water, and love is bought by the hour. This is Yoshiwara, the legendary red light district of Edo. To the men who visited, it was paradise on earth. But to the women who lived here, it was something else entirely. A cage, a glittering, beautiful prison. Today, we step inside the walls of Yoshiwara. We will uncover the difference between geisha and Oiran, a distinction most people get wrong. We will look at the glorious fashion, the complex rituals, and the dark, tragic reality hidden beneath the makeup. Forget the memoirs of a geisha. This is the real story. Chapter 1. The Cage with No Exit. First, how did women end up here? Did they choose this career? Almost never. Most were sold by their parents. Famines, debts, poverty. Desperate fathers sold their daughters to brokers for a handful of coins. Usually, they were sold around the age of 10. Once you entered the great gate of Yoshiwara, you couldn't leave. The entire district was surrounded by high walls and a black, sludge-filled moat called the Oiran Dochu. Escape was impossible. You were property. The young girls started as servants, called kamuro. They did chores, learned etiquette, calligraphy, and music. It was a brutal education. They were groomed to become the perfect entertainers, but only a handful of them would reach the top of the hierarchy. The rest would live a life of obscurity. But those who did reach the top became legends. Before you even stepped into Yoshiwara, you needed a map, or rather, a menu. It was called the Yoshiwara Saiken. Think of it as the Michelin Guide or Tinder of the Edo period. Updated twice a year, this guidebook listed the names, ranks, and prices of thousands of women. Men would study this book obsessively in cafes before entering the gates. Which house has the best sake? Which Oiran is the most beautiful? It was a bestseller, but for the women listed inside, it was a catalog of products. Their entire worth was reduced to a few lines of ink on paper. Chapter 2. The fashion icons of Edo. These women were prisoners, yes, but they were also the undeniable queens of fashion. Imagine Lady Gaga or the Kardashians, but in 18th century Japan. That was the Oiran. Everything they wore became an instant trend across the country. Take their feet, for example. Even in the freezing winter snow, a top-ranking Oiran never wore socks tabi. Walking barefoot on the cold ground was considered the height of Iki, a unique Edo aesthetic of coolness and chic. I am so tough, the cold doesn't bother me. That was the message. Their kimonos were masterpieces of embroidery, weighing up to 30 kilograms, 66 pounds. Walking in them, balanced on tall wooden clogs, required immense physical strength and grace. They turned the red light district into a runway. Women all over Japan copied their hairstyles and kimono patterns. They were the tragic idols of the first era, admired by everyone, yet owned by the system. We talked about fashion, but we must talk about the makeup. That iconic white skin wasn't just paint, it was poison. The white powder, called Oshiroi, was made from lead. Yes, heavy metal. Lead poisoning was an occupational hazard. It caused skin discoloration, stomach pains, and eventually, brain damage. The more they tried to look beautiful to cover the sickness, the more poison they applied. The literal price of beauty was their own life. This is where things get confusing for many foreigners. Geisha and Oiran are not the same. In fact, during the Edo period, the Oiran was the superstar, far ranking above the geisha. Think of an Oiran as a top-tier Hollywood actress combined with a supermodel. She was the trendsetter of fashion. Her job included sex, yes, but you couldn't just pay money and sleep with her. She had the right to reject customers. If she didn't like you, even if you were a rich samurai, you were out. On the other hand, geishas were purely entertainers. Gei means art. They sold their skills, music, dance, and conversation, not their bodies. In fact, strictly speaking, geishas in Yoshiwara were forbidden from sleeping with customers to protect the Oiran's business. The Oiran was the queen of the night. She wore clothes that weighed over 20 kilograms, 44 pounds, and walked on high black clogs in a specific slow rhythm. Just to meet her required a massive amount of money and a complex three-step ritual. Chapter 3. The Art of Deception. But looking cool wasn't enough. To survive, they had to be smart, extremely smart. A popular Oiran might have dozens of boyfriends, patrons, and she had to make every single one of them believe. You are my only true love. How? Through the art of the love letter. But she was too busy to write them all. So she hired professional ghostwriters. These scribes wrote thousands of passionate letters on her behalf. I miss you. I dream of you all. Mass-produced lies sent out to different men on the same day. Sometimes words weren't enough. Men wanted proof of love. They would ask for a vow. In extreme cases, couples would promise double suicide, shinju, to prove their eternal bond. To convince them, an Oiran might cut off a lock of her hair or a piece of her nail and give it to the man. This is part of me. Keep it. The man would weep with joy, but often that hair or nail belonged to someone else, maybe a servant or even a fake. It was the world's first romance scam, but we cannot blame them. For these women, deceiving men was the only way to secure money, pay off their debts, and dream of freedom. Meeting a top-ranking Oiran was not like a Tinder date. It was a military operation. First, you had to have money, insane amounts of it. One night with a top Oiran could cost the equivalent of a modern luxury car, and you couldn't even speak to her on the first date. This was the brutal 3-meeting rule. Meeting number 1. The show face. You sit in a corner, far away from her. She sits at the top, ignoring you completely. She won't drink your sake. She won't smile. She won't even look at you. You are just a wallet paying for the party. Meeting number 2. A little closer. She might say a few words, but still no touching. Meeting number 3. Finally, you are a regular. She has your name painted on her chopsticks. Now, and only now, can you share a bed. It was a psychological game designed to make men spend everything they had to conquer the unconquerable queen. The night in Yoshiwara was loud and bright, but the morning was silent and sad. This moment was called Kinuginu, the parting of silk. At the break of dawn, a bell would ring. The illusion of romance had to end. The guest would put on his clothes and leave through the back door to hide his face. The Oiran would stand at the lattice window, watching him leave. Was she sad? Or was she relieved? Perhaps she was just looking at the sky, counting the days until her debt was paid. The morning sun revealed the cracks in the walls and the fading makeup. The magic was over. Chapter 4. Fire and Desperation. There is an old saying, fires and fights are the flowers of Edo. The city was made of wood and paper, so it burned often. For normal citizens, a fire was a tragedy. But for the women of Yoshiwara, it was a paradox. It was terrifying, yet it was also a chance. When the district caught fire, the heavy iron gates were sometimes opened. It was the only moment the beautiful prison crumbled. History records tell us sad stories. Some women, driven by despair, were rumored to have set fire to their own dormitories, hoping that in the chaos they could run away. But where to run? Yoshiwara was surrounded by the Ohaguro Dobu, a wide moat filled with black sludge. Many women, with nowhere else to go, jumped into the dark water to escape the heat and never came back up. The fire didn't bring freedom, it only brought silence. But the glamour was a mask. Underneath the expensive silk was a rotting reality. Disease. Specifically, syphilis. In Edo, it was said, if you don't have syphilis, you aren't a real man. It was an epidemic. For the Oiran, it was a death sentence. There were no antibiotics. The only medicine was mercury. Yes, they drank poison to cure the disease. The side effects were horrific, often leading to madness or death. Most women in Yoshiwara didn't live past their 20s. They died from disease, botched abortions, or suicide. And when they died, they weren't treated like queens anymore. Since they were sold and had no family, their bodies were often wrapped in straw mats and thrown into a temple nearby. It was called the Nagekomi Dera, literally, the throwaway temple. Over 20,000 nameless souls are buried there. The Oiran was a flower that bloomed gloriously for a moment, only to be discarded in the mud. A requiem. Yoshiwara is gone now. The fashion, the scams, the fires, and the tears, all washed away by time. But let's not remember them just as victims or liars. They were artists. They were fashion icons. They were fighters who survived a hellish system with wit and beauty. In a world that treated them as products, they fought to remain human. Perhaps the true unseen Edo is not the buildings or the history, but the strength of these forgotten women. History is not just dates and wars. It's about people. And sometimes, the most beautiful stories are the saddest ones. This was Unseen Edo. Subscribe and ring the bell to unlock the next gate.